The moment that room exploded in laughter, something inside my mind went silent. Not anger, not embarrassment. Silence. Imagine spending 8 months building something you believe could reshape an entire industry. 8 months of nights where sleep feels like a luxury you cannot afford. 8 months watching numbers move in ways that tell you a hidden pattern exists beneath everything people think they understand. Now imagine standing in front of 12 executives who control the future of that idea, and they start laughing before you even finish the explanation. That was the moment everything began. The screen behind me showed a moving dashboard filled with predictions, colored graphs adjusting in real time, customer behavior patterns updating every few seconds as the system learned. I held the presentation remote in my hand while the chief strategy officer leaned back in his chair with a grin that looked almost bored. He glanced at the screen and shook his head. "Daniel," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, "this is interesting math. But companies like ours do not run on experiments." Several people around the table smiled. One executive whispered something to the person beside him. Both of them laughed quietly. Another flipped through the printed proposal and pushed it aside. "Cute." That word came from the far end of the table. "Honestly," someone said, "it feels like a college project." The room warmed with amusement. I stood there listening to it. Inside my chest, something strange happened. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Because when people laugh without understanding what they are seeing, it means one thing. They are blind. And blind people miss things. The system behind me predicted customer demand shifts before they appeared in sales reports. It studied millions of transactions and recognized patterns invisible to humans. Timing, location, behavior changes. Signals so small they felt meaningless until the system connected them. When the signals combined, they created forecasts. Accurate ones. During testing, I ran historical simulations. If our company had used the system during the previous year, revenue would have increased 23%. 23. That number alone should have ended the meeting with excitement. Instead, the chief executive officer folded his hands and looked at me like someone waiting for a magician to finish a trick. "Daniel," he said calmly, "you are proposing we invest $2 million into a theory." "It is not a theory," I answered. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to a live demonstration. Customer data streamed across the system while predictions appeared seconds later. The algorithm detected demand spikes for 3 products in specific cities. Those predictions would become real in 48 hours. I knew this because the historical model had already shown the same pattern repeating. One of the executives checked his watch. Another one opened his laptop. Someone else sighed. That was the moment I realized none of them had even tried to understand what the system was doing. They saw charts. They heard numbers. But the meaning never reached them. Imagine explaining electricity to someone who believes candles will last forever. The chief financial officer leaned forward. "How long did you work on this?" 8 months. "And during that time," he said, "did anyone ask you to build it?" No, a quiet smile crossed his face. That smile carried a message. "You wasted your time." The chief executive officer tapped his pen against the table. "Daniel, our leadership team already evaluates market strategy. Predictive models sound impressive, but businesses grow through discipline, not clever ideas." Clever ideas. The room nodded slowly. The meeting had already ended in their minds. Still, I tried one more time. I explained how the system could adjust pricing in real time, how it could warn about supply shortages weeks earlier, how it could reveal opportunities competitors would not notice until it was too late. While I spoke, the chief strategy officer raised his hand. That gesture stopped everything. "Let me simplify this," he said. He pointed at the screen behind me. "You built a machine that guesses what customers might want." "It does not guess," I said. "It analyzes behavior patterns." He shrugged. "Guessing with math." The room laughed again. The laughter lasted longer this time. Imagine standing there knowing the people laughing could earn millions from the system you built. Yet they dismiss it because they cannot see beyond their habits. The chief executive officer closed the folder containing my proposal. "Daniel, innovation inside large companies requires structure. Individual experiments create chaos." He slid the folder toward the center of the table. "We will pass." Just like that. 8 months ended with a single sentence. No discussion. No follow-up questions. Nothing. The executives began talking about the next agenda item while I still stood there. Someone mentioned quarterly earnings. Someone else discussed expansion plans. My presentation became invisible. I walked back to my seat slowly. The screen behind me faded to black. My proposal remained on the table untouched. For a moment, I considered leaving it there. Then I walked back, picked it up, and returned to my chair. The meeting ended 15 minutes later. People gathered their laptops and coffee cups. Chairs scraped across the floor. The executives walked out without looking at me again. Only one person paused near the door. A senior manager named Robert glanced at the presentation papers in my hand. He leaned closer and spoke quietly. "Do not take it personally," he said. "They reject dozens of ideas every month." Then he left. That sentence echoed in my mind as I returned to my desk. Dozens of ideas. But not every idea carries the weight of something powerful. Most ideas fail quietly. This one had already proven itself. And the people responsible for seeing that truth had just laughed at it. The office looked the same as it always had. Rows of desks. Monitors glowing softly. Employees focused on spreadsheets and reports. Everything normal. Yet my mind kept replaying one detail from the meeting. None of the executives asked for the code. None of them asked how the model worked. None of them asked to test it. They rejected the idea without investigating it. That detail mattered, because it meant they had made a decision without knowledge. Decisions like that often grow expensive. That evening I stayed late. Most of the office lights turned off one by one. The building grew quiet. I opened the prototype on my laptop and watched the system run. Predictions appeared across the dashboard again. Signals shifting. Patterns forming. Opportunities emerging in numbers that looked almost unreal. The system was not a toy. It was a machine capable of turning hidden data into money. And the people who controlled millions of dollars had ignored it. A strange thought crossed my mind. What if someone else understood the value? I opened my employment contract. 32 pages of legal language. Clauses about intellectual property. Ownership rights. Work created during employment. I read every line slowly. Then I read them again. Around midnight, something caught my attention. A single section describing independent work created outside official assignments. The language felt narrow, precise, gray. The clause stated that personal projects developed outside assigned responsibilities could remain personal property if they avoided company resources. I leaned back in my chair. Because my system had started as a personal experiment months earlier. The earliest code existed before I ever presented it. Built on my own computer, using public datasets. Only the demonstration used company information. A quiet realization began forming. The boardroom believed they had rejected an idea. But rejection has consequences. When someone refuses ownership of an idea, that idea begins searching for a new owner. And that night, I started wondering something that would change everything. What would happen if I took the idea somewhere else? Imagine the executives who laughed discovering that the system they dismissed was now worth millions. Or more. 3 weeks later, I submitted my resignation. Human Resources called me into a small office. They asked the routine question, "Where are you planning to go next?" I smiled politely. "I have not decided yet." That answer sounded harmless. But the truth was far more dangerous. Because somewhere outside that building, investors were already searching for the exact technology those executives had just ignored. And when they discovered what I built, the same people who laughed in that boardroom would try very hard to stop me. The morning after I left the company, my alarm rang at 6:30. For 6 years, that sound had meant one thing. Rush to the office. Check overnight reports. Sit through meetings where the same ideas moved in circles. That morning, the sound meant something else. Freedom. And danger. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the small apartment around me. Nothing about the room looked like the headquarters of a future company. A cheap desk near the window. 2 monitors I bought during a discount sale. Whiteboards filled with scribbled equations. That was the entire operation. Imagine leaving a stable salary to bet your future on lines of code that most people had already laughed at. Anyone looking from the outside would think the decision was reckless. But the boardroom had already shown me something more frightening than failure. They showed me what happens when powerful people refuse to see value. I walked to the desk and opened the system. The dashboard appeared immediately. Streams of simulated data flowed across the screen while predictions formed beside them. Colored indicators shifting every few seconds. The model had grown stronger during the last weeks at the company. Faster processing, sharper predictions, cleaner architecture that avoided any internal company data. That last change mattered. If anyone ever tried claiming ownership, the system would need to stand completely independent. I leaned forward and ran a test using retail transaction data collected from public market feeds. The algorithm began scanning patterns: purchase timing, regional shifts, supply movement. Within seconds, the model flagged a rising demand signal across 3 cities. The system predicted a supply shortage in 40 hours. I compared the forecast with historical records. The match was perfect. That was the moment my fear returned. Not fear that the system would fail, fear that it might succeed too well. Because success attracts attention, and attention attracts enemies. My phone buzzed on the desk. An email notification appeared. For a moment, I expected something ordinary. Spam. Marketing. Instead, I saw a message from an unknown sender. The subject line contained only 4 words. You might want this. I opened it slowly. Inside the message was a short sentence. You should be careful. No greeting. No name. Just those words. Beneath them sat a screenshot. My chest tightened instantly. The screenshot showed a photo taken during the boardroom meeting 3 weeks earlier. The presentation screen behind me. The slides visible. Someone had taken the picture from inside the room. I stared at the image. My proposal title was visible on the screen. Predictive Demand Architecture. The email contained one more sentence below the screenshot. They laughed at it, but they might not forget it. I read the message 3 times. Someone inside the company had sent it. Someone who attended the meeting. But why? Warning me or threatening me? Both possibilities felt real. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen. The apartment felt smaller than usual. Every quiet sound in the building suddenly felt noticeable. Pipes moving behind the walls. Footsteps from neighbors upstairs. I poured coffee and tried to slow my thoughts. If the executives suddenly realized the value of the idea, they might attempt something dangerous. Claim ownership. Pressure investors. Block development. Large companies protect their reputation aggressively. But another possibility existed. Maybe the email came from someone who believed in the idea. Someone who wanted me to succeed. Either way, the message changed the situation. I could not move slowly anymore. If the company discovered I continued developing the system, they might react quickly. Speed became my advantage. I returned to the desk and opened a list I created weeks earlier. Technology investors. Venture capital firms. Data-focused funds. 30 names. 30 possible doors. Most founders spend months preparing a pitch. I had spent 8 months building the product instead. That difference mattered, because investors care about proof. And I had something better than a presentation. A working machine. I spent the entire day researching each investor carefully. What companies they funded. What industries they believed in. Which partners focused on artificial intelligence. Late in the afternoon, I sent my first email. Short. Direct. No dramatic language. I built a predictive data system that identifies market demand shifts before they appear in sales reports. Demonstration available. Looking for early-stage investment. Then I attached a video showing the system predicting retail demand changes. The email went to 7 investors. After sending it, the apartment became painfully quiet. Waiting is a strange form of pressure. Minutes stretch longer than hours. Doubt begins whispering inside your mind. What if the boardroom executives were right? What if the system only worked inside controlled testing? What if investors laughed the same way those executives did? The evening passed slowly. No replies arrived. At midnight, I shut down the monitors and tried sleeping. But sleep refused to cooperate. My mind replayed every moment from the boardroom meeting again. The laughter. The word cute. The folder sliding across the table. Around 3 in the morning, I opened my laptop again. One new email waited. My heart jumped slightly. The sender belonged to a venture capital firm in San Francisco. The message contained only 2 sentences. Your system demonstration is interesting. Can you provide technical documentation? Interesting. Not rejection. I answered immediately with architecture diagrams and testing results. Then the waiting started again. Morning arrived before I slept. The next 2 days passed in a strange rhythm. Build. Test. Send information to investors. 3 of them replied with polite rejection. 1 never answered. 2 asked technical questions. Then something unexpected happened on the 4th day. Another email arrived. This one looked different. The sender belonged to a small investment group known for funding data companies. The message contained a request. Would you be available for a private demonstration tomorrow? My pulse quickened. The email included a name I recognized. Marcus Hale. He was known in the technology world as someone who invested early in several successful data startups. Marcus rarely contacted founders directly. That detail made the request even more surprising. I confirmed the meeting immediately. The demonstration would happen through a video call. 24 hours. That was all the preparation time I had. The entire night became a blur of adjustments. I refined the dashboard interface, improved prediction visualization, prepared multiple datasets for testing. By morning, the apartment looked like a command center. Whiteboards covered with calculations. Coffee cups scattered everywhere. At exactly 11 in the morning, the video call began. Marcus Hale appeared on the screen. He looked calm, observant, not the type of person who laughs at ideas without understanding them. "Show me what the system does," he said. No small talk. No introductions. I shared the screen. The dashboard appeared. Streams of financial transaction data began flowing through the model. Predictions formed seconds later. Marcus watched silently. His eyes moved between the graphs and the algorithm output. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. The system predicted demand spikes across 2 product categories. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "How far ahead are these forecasts?" 48 hours. And accuracy? 91% during historical testing. The silence returned. Then Marcus said something that made the entire room feel different. "If those numbers are real, someone should have already invested in this." "They had the opportunity," I said. "What happened?" They laughed. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He studied me for a moment. Then he asked a question that changed the direction of everything. "Does your former employer know you continued building this?" I hesitated for half a second. "No," Marcus nodded slowly. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "If they discover it, they might try claiming it." The same warning from the anonymous email. 2 completely different people saying the same thing. Marcus continued speaking calmly. "I want to run a live test." He uploaded a dataset from a retail chain that had not been part of my development process. The system began scanning it immediately. Patterns formed. Signals appeared. Within seconds, the algorithm produced a forecast. Marcus checked something on another screen. His expression changed. Not shock. Recognition. Because the system had predicted a supply disruption already happening in one of the company's warehouses. Marcus looked back at the screen and smiled slightly. "That," he said quietly, "is not guessing." My chest tightened again, because his next sentence carried weight far beyond investment. "Daniel, if what you built works at scale, the people who rejected it made a catastrophic mistake." He paused briefly. "Tell me how much funding you need." Marcus Hale did not look like someone who made emotional decisions. His face remained calm while the system continued processing the retail dataset he uploaded. Numbers shifted across the screen. Forecast signals strengthened. The prediction engine identified 2 supply disruptions and a demand spike forming in a region neither of us had mentioned earlier. Marcus watched quietly. I could almost hear his mind calculating possibilities. Investors like Marcus do not chase ideas. They chase leverage, the ability to turn small advantages into enormous outcomes. After several minutes, he spoke again. "Explain the architecture." No praise, no excitement, just analysis. I pulled up the technical structure. 3 layers built the engine. Data intake, pattern detection, predictive modeling. The system collected signals from multiple streams and cross-examined them continuously. Consumer purchases, shipment timing, regional buying cycles. Small patterns that looked harmless alone became powerful when connected together. Marcus listened without interrupting. Every so often he asked a short question. "How long does training take?" 30 minutes with fresh datasets. "How scalable is the system?" Unlimited with distributed computing. "What stops competitors from copying it?" The prediction model learns continuously. The longer it runs, the more accurate it becomes. That last answer made Marcus nod slowly. Machines that improve with time create natural advantage. The longer they exist, the harder they become to replace. Marcus folded his hands. "How many people helped you build this?" "No one." His eyebrow lifted slightly. "You built the entire system yourself?" "Yes." That answer created a long pause. Then Marcus leaned closer to the camera. "I have invested in 26 technology companies. Most founders show ideas. Some show prototypes. Very few show something already working." He pointed at the dashboard. "This works." The words felt simple, but they carried weight. Because investors rarely say something works unless they mean it. Marcus opened a document on his screen. I want to move quickly. My pulse increased. He continued speaking calmly. My group can provide an early investment of $2 million. Enough to build infrastructure, hire engineers, and begin commercial testing. 2 million. The same number the executives had laughed at in the boardroom. Except now someone was offering it. Marcus raised a finger before I could answer. One condition. I waited. You must confirm your previous employer cannot legally claim this technology. There it was again. The warning. Ownership. Intellectual property. The same invisible shadow following this idea everywhere. I reviewed my contract. I said. The core system was developed independently. Marcus studied me carefully. You sound confident. I am. Confidence matters in negotiations. But inside my mind another thought moved quietly. Confidence does not stop lawsuits. Marcus continued. My legal team will review everything before we transfer funds. That is reasonable. He nodded. If the legal situation is clean, we move forward immediately. Then he said something that carried unexpected meaning. Daniel, people inside corporations ignore powerful ideas every day. The problem is not intelligence. The problem is comfort. He paused briefly. Comfort makes people blind. Those words felt familiar. Because that blindness had created this opportunity. The meeting ended 40 minutes later. Marcus promised to contact me within 2 days. When the call ended, the apartment suddenly felt silent again. But the silence felt different. $2 million. That number echoed in my thoughts. Not because of the money. Because of what it represented. Validation. Proof that the boardroom had been wrong. Still, excitement came with another emotion. Pressure. If investors became involved, the idea would no longer be invisible. And visibility attracts attention. The same company that laughed might suddenly become very interested. That evening I began preparing documents for Marcus's legal team. Development timelines. Source code history. Hardware logs from my personal computer. Every detail proving the system existed independently. The work continued past midnight. At one point I paused and opened the old presentation slides from the boardroom meeting. The title still stared back at me. Predictive Demand Architecture. I remembered the laughter again. A strange thought crossed my mind. What if those executives suddenly realized what they had rejected? The idea felt distant. They had already dismissed it. But sometimes powerful people change their minds quickly when money appears. The next morning, I woke to several new emails. 2 investors who previously ignored my message now wanted meetings. Another firm asked for technical documentation. News spreads fast among investors. Someone had already talked. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Daniel Mercer? Yes. This is Lydia from Hale Ventures. Marcus's firm. We finished the initial review of your materials. My chest tightened slightly. And our legal team wants a few clarifications about the employment contract. That sentence carried tension. What kind of clarifications? They want confirmation that the algorithm architecture existed before your boardroom presentation. It did. Can you prove it? I opened the development logs immediately. Yes. Send everything. The call ended quickly. I gathered every timestamp from the project history. Code commits. Testing records. System builds. The earliest version of the algorithm dated back 9 months before the boardroom meeting. Proof. Clear and simple. I sent the entire package to Hale Ventures. Then the waiting began again. Hours passed slowly. Late afternoon arrived. My phone buzzed again. Another email. This one did not come from Marcus. The sender name made my stomach tighten. It belonged to my former company. The subject line read, "Follow-up regarding internal presentation." My pulse quickened as I opened the message. Inside the email sat a polite request from the corporate legal department. They wanted a meeting. No explanation. Just a request. The timing felt suspicious. 3 weeks of silence after my resignation. Now suddenly they wanted to talk. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. The anonymous email warning returned to my mind. They might not forget it. Maybe someone inside the company had mentioned the system again. Maybe they were beginning to ask questions. Or maybe the email was nothing. Corporate legal departments send strange messages sometimes. Still, the coincidence felt too precise. I closed the email without replying. 2 hours later, Marcus called. Daniel. Yes. Our legal team reviewed your development logs. My heart pounded slightly. And They confirmed the system existed before your presentation. Relief washed through me. Marcus continued. That means your employer cannot claim the core technology. A heavy weight lifted from my chest. But Marcus did not sound relaxed. There is still a risk. What kind of risk? They might attempt a lawsuit anyway. That possibility had always existed. Large companies sometimes rely on pressure rather than truth. What happens if they try? I asked. Marcus answered calmly. We fight. His tone carried confidence. And in the meantime, he added, we move forward quickly. How quickly? Marcus smiled slightly. My team is preparing the investment documents right now. $2 million. The system would finally have resources. Servers. Engineers. Infrastructure. A real company. But Marcus said one more thing before ending the call. Daniel, success will attract attention faster than failure ever could. I understand. Then prepare yourself. For what? For the moment your former executives realized they rejected something extremely valuable. The line went quiet. I sat there thinking about the boardroom again. The laughter. The word cute. The folder sliding across the table. Imagine the same people discovering the idea they ignored was now funded and growing. How would they react? Anger. Denial. Maybe fear. 3 days later, the investment contract arrived. $2 million transferred to a newly formed company. My company. The system finally had a name. Signal Forge. The moment the money entered the account, everything changed. Engineers began joining the team. Cloud infrastructure expanded the system capacity. Early pilot programs launched with 2 retail companies willing to test the technology quietly. Predictions continued proving accurate. More accurate every week. And then something happened that made my stomach drop. Because the company that laughed at the idea announced something unexpected. They released a press statement. The headline contained 3 words that felt strangely familiar. New Predictive Data Initiative. My hands tightened around the phone, because the description sounded dangerously close to the system I built. The announcement appeared on every major business news website the same morning. I saw it while drinking coffee at my desk. The headline looked harmless at first. Our company launches Predictive Data Initiative. But the moment I opened the article, something cold moved through my chest. The description felt painfully familiar. The company claimed they were building a system designed to predict customer demand before it appeared in sales reports. They promised smarter inventory management, real-time price adjustments, early detection of regional buying shifts. The same promises my system already delivered. The same ideas the boardroom had laughed at. For a long moment, I simply stared at the screen. Not anger. Something sharper. Suspicion. Because the executives had rejected my proposal without asking questions. Now suddenly they were announcing something similar. That change did not happen by accident. My phone buzzed on the desk. Marcus. I answered immediately. You saw the announcement, he said. Yes. His voice carried no surprise. We expected something like this. How? When large companies realize they ignored something valuable, they often attempt to recreate it quickly. I leaned back in my chair. But they rejected the concept. Executives reject ideas every day, Marcus said calmly. Reputation matters more than consistency. They will act like the concept was always part of their strategy. The explanation made sense. But another thought troubled me. What if they try claiming I took the idea from them? Marcus paused for a moment. That is possible. The word possible felt heavy. But your development logs protect you, he continued. They prove the core system existed earlier. Still, the announcement bothered me. Because one detail inside the article stood out. The company described their project as already being under development. Under development. That phrase suggested something older than 3 weeks. Something closer to the moment I presented the idea. Marcus spoke again. Daniel, right now your focus stays on growth. Not the announcement. Announcements do not generate profit. Products do. His calm tone steadied my thoughts slightly. He was right. Signal Forge had already begun pilot programs. 2 retail chains were testing the prediction engine quietly. Early results looked powerful. Demand forecasts helped them shift inventory before shortages appeared. One client avoided a warehouse supply collapse that would have cost millions. Another client increased product availability during a sudden demand surge. The system worked. That truth mattered more than corporate press releases. Still, curiosity pushed me to read deeper into the article. One paragraph near the bottom caught my attention. The company planned to release their predictive system within 18 months. 18 months. That timeline felt painfully slow. Signal Forge already had a working platform. Our system improved every day through machine learning feedback. 18 months meant they were starting almost from nothing. Or pretending to. I closed the article and returned to work. The next weeks moved quickly. Signal Forge grew from 1 person to 6. 2 engineers joined to strengthen the infrastructure. A data scientist improved pattern recognition. A product designer rebuilt the interface. Our small office occupied the corner of a rented building overlooking a busy street. Nothing luxurious. Just desks, monitors, and whiteboards filled with algorithms. But energy filled the room. Every prediction the system made strengthened our confidence. Every success story from pilot customers built credibility. Marcus visited once during those early weeks. He walked slowly around the office observing everything. The screens, the engineers, the prediction dashboards running in real time. This is how powerful companies begin, he said quietly. With small rooms and dangerous ideas. Dangerous ideas. I understood exactly what he meant. Because Signal Forge did something most businesses could not. It turned uncertainty into advantage. Markets always produce signals before change arrives. But those signals hide beneath noise. Most companies react after events happen. Signal Forge reacted before they happened. That difference created opportunity. 3 months passed. Our client list expanded from 2 companies to 5. Revenue began appearing. Not millions yet, but enough to prove the system had commercial value. The prediction engine improved constantly. Machine learning models grew sharper with every new dataset. By the end of the 3rd month, our accuracy climbed above 93%. Investors noticed. Several venture funds contacted Marcus asking about the company. Rumors spread quietly inside the technology world. A startup building predictive market intelligence. Fast, precise, scalable. Attention grew, and attention eventually reached the wrong people. One afternoon, our office receptionist walked into the main room holding a large envelope. Her expression looked uncertain. "This arrived for you," she said. The envelope felt heavy. Thick legal paper. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. The sender name confirmed my suspicion. My former employer. Corporate legal department. Every person in the office watched silently as I unfolded the document. The first line contained the words, "Every startup founder fears." Notice of intellectual property violation. The letter claimed Signal Forge had stolen proprietary concepts belonging to the company. They demanded we stop using the technology immediately. They threatened legal action if development continued. My chest tightened. The room stayed silent. One of the engineers spoke carefully. "Is this serious?" "Yes." The letter contained several pages of legal language. Claims, warnings, threats. They argued the predictive concept originated during my employment. Therefore, the company believed they owned the technology. The accusation ignored the development logs proving the opposite. But lawsuits rarely care about logic. They care about pressure. And pressure can destroy small companies quickly. Marcus arrived at the office less than 2 hours later. He read the letter quietly. Then he placed it on the table. "They are bluffing," he said. "Are you sure?" No, his honesty surprised me. "But they are worried." "How do you know?" Marcus pointed at the first paragraph. They would not send this if they believed their own system would succeed. The idea made sense. Companies confident in their projects do not chase former employees with legal threats. They build products. This letter revealed fear. Fear that Signal Forge might win the race. Marcus folded the document again. "They want you to stop building. They cannot prove ownership. That will not stop them from trying." "What happens next?" Marcus smiled slightly. "We respond." The calm confidence in his voice surprised me. But the situation had already grown larger than a simple argument. Large corporations do not like losing control, especially when millions of dollars might be involved. Marcus explained the next steps. His legal team would answer the letter immediately. They would present evidence proving the system existed before my presentation. If the company continued pushing the claim, the conflict would move into court. Court. The word felt heavy. Lawsuits consume time, money, energy. Small startups rarely survive long battles against corporate legal teams. Marcus noticed the concern on my face. "Daniel, this is not unusual. For startups. For powerful ideas." He leaned closer. Companies ignore ideas until those ideas begin threatening them. That sentence carried truth. Signal Forge had grown quickly. Clients were already seeing profit from the predictions, and news about our accuracy had begun spreading quietly through industry circles. My former employer could see the same signals, which meant they understood something now. The idea they laughed at might become extremely valuable. Marcus placed the letter back on the table. They ignored your idea, he said calmly. Now they want it back. I stared at the paper for a long moment, because one question echoed inside my mind. What would happen if the conflict reached a courtroom? The lawsuit arrived 2 weeks later. No warning, no negotiation, just a thick package delivered by courier early in the morning. I opened the envelope slowly while the team watched from across the office. The first page confirmed what we already suspected. My former employer had officially filed a lawsuit against Signal Forge. They claimed I had stolen corporate intellectual property. They demanded the immediate shutdown of the platform. They also demanded ownership of the technology. Ownership. That single word carried a price larger than any investment. If they won, Signal Forge would disappear overnight. The system, the company, every hour of work, gone. For several seconds, the office stayed completely silent. One of the engineers finally spoke. Can they actually do this? Yes, Marcus said calmly from across the table. He had already begun reading the document. Large companies file lawsuits like this often. That does not answer the question, the engineer said. Marcus looked up. Yes, they can do it. My stomach tightened. But winning is a different matter. He turned the page slowly. Their legal argument stretched across dozens of paragraphs. According to them, the predictive demand concept originated inside the company during my employment. Therefore, they claimed the intellectual foundation belonged to them. They argued Signal Forge represented unauthorized use of internal strategy. The argument felt familiar. Corporate lawyers often use the same playbook. Blur the timeline. Create doubt. Pressure the smaller opponent into surrender. Marcus finished reading the final page and closed the folder. They want an injunction. What does that mean? Someone asked. They want the court to shut down Signal Forge while the case proceeds. The room filled with tension, because that move could destroy the company immediately. If the system stopped running, clients would leave. Investors would panic. The startup would collapse long before the trial finished. I leaned back in my chair slowly. They rejected the idea, I said. Marcus nodded. Yes. And now they want to claim it. Yes. The logic felt absurd. But lawsuits rarely care about fairness. They care about leverage. Marcus stood and walked toward the window. Traffic moved slowly through the street below. After a moment, he spoke again. The good news is your documentation is strong. The development logs? Yes. And the system architecture predates the boardroom presentation. That fact mattered. But legal battles rarely depend on facts alone. The company had something powerful on their side. Resources. Corporate legal teams often contain dozens of lawyers. Signal Forge had too. Marcus turned back toward me. Daniel, this case will move quickly at the beginning. The injunction hearing? Yes. If the judge believes their argument even slightly, the system could be frozen temporarily. I felt a wave of frustration rising inside my chest. They ignored the idea. Completely. Marcus nodded. Which is exactly why their internal emails will become very interesting. What emails? Marcus smiled slightly. We will request discovery. Discovery. The legal process where both sides must reveal internal communication. Emails. Documents. Meeting notes. Anything related to the case. If the company had truly ignored the idea, those records would prove it. Marcus explained the strategy carefully. Signal Forge would fight the injunction aggressively. Our lawyers would present development logs proving the technology existed independently. We would also demand internal documents from the company. Those records might reveal something valuable. Evidence showing the executives dismissed the concept, or evidence showing they plan to copy it later. Either possibility would weaken their argument. The room slowly regained energy as Marcus described the plan. But I could still feel the pressure building. Court battles carry emotional weight. Public scrutiny, uncertainty, and risk. By the end of the meeting, our legal response was already underway. Marcus's lawyers began preparing the defense. Technical reports, development timelines, source code history, every detail proving the independence of Signal Forge. 3 days later, another message arrived, this time from someone unexpected. The anonymous sender who warned me earlier. The email contained no greeting again. Only a single line. They are panicking. Attached beneath the sentence sat a document. An internal company email. The sender name belonged to the chief strategy officer, the same man who laughed during my presentation. My hands tightened as I read the message. It had been written the day after the boardroom meeting. The subject line read, "Regarding Mercer proposal." The message itself contained a short conversation between executives. One executive wrote, "The idea sounds interesting, but Daniel does not have the authority to push something like this." Another replied, "We should revisit the concept later after evaluating other priorities." Then the chief strategy officer answered, "Not worth the time. Focus on current projects." I stared at the screen. The email proved something powerful. The executives did not claim ownership. They dismissed the idea. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later and examined the document carefully. "Where did you get this?" "Anonymous email." Marcus looked impressed. "This is valuable." "How valuable?" "It proves they rejected the concept." He leaned back slowly. "If we find more messages like this, their case becomes extremely weak." "But the email came from someone inside the company." Marcus nodded. "Which means someone there wants you to win." The thought felt strange. An invisible ally inside the corporation. Someone quietly sending evidence. Someone risking their job. I saved the document immediately. Marcus handed it to the legal team. They added it to our defense package. 1 week later, the injunction hearing arrived. The courtroom looked smaller than I expected. Wooden benches. Quiet whispers. Lawyers carrying thick folders. The judge entered the room, and everyone stood. My former employer sat across the courtroom with a team of attorneys. More than 10 people surrounded their table. Expensive suits. Confident expressions. They looked prepared for a long fight. Marcus leaned toward me and spoke quietly. "Do not react to anything they say." "I will try." Their lead attorney stood and began speaking. He described Signal Forge as a company built on stolen corporate innovation. He claimed the predictive concept originated entirely inside the company. He insisted the technology belonged to them. The argument sounded confident, polished, but something inside it felt hollow. Because I remembered the boardroom clearly. The laughter, the rejection. Our lawyer stood next. She placed development logs before the judge. Code history, system architecture records, technical timelines. Then she introduced the internal email, the one sent by the chief strategy officer. The courtroom grew quiet as the judge read the message carefully. The words spoke clearly. Not worth the time. Those 4 words carried unexpected power. They revealed the truth. The company had seen the idea and ignored it. My former employer's lawyers shifted slightly at their table. They knew the email weakened their claim, but they still had one more move. Their lead attorney stood again. He looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, we have additional evidence." The courtroom went silent, because the next document he revealed changed the entire direction of the case. It was my employment contract, and highlighted inside the contract sat a single clause. A clause claiming that any innovation related to company operations could belong to the company. The courtroom grew so quiet that I could hear the faint rustle of paper across the judge's desk. The opposing attorney held my employment contract in both hands while standing beside the evidence table. His voice carried confidence, the kind that comes from believing a single document can crush months of preparation. He pointed to the highlighted section. "Your Honor, Mr. Mercer signed this agreement before joining the company." The language clearly states that innovations related to company operations belong to the company. The attorney paused and let the sentence settle across the room. Then he read the clause aloud. It stated that any concept developed during employment that related to company business activity could be considered company property. The words sounded dangerous, not because they were new, because they were vague. Vague language is the favorite weapon of corporate lawyers. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates leverage. The attorney continued speaking. "Signal Forge operates in the exact industry as my client. The predictive demand concept directly relates to the company's operational strategy." He looked toward me. "Mr. Mercer presented this idea during an internal meeting while he was employed. That alone establishes corporate ownership." Several heads in the courtroom nodded slightly. The argument sounded simple, clean, persuasive. My stomach tightened, because the clause did exist. I remembered reading it during my late-night contract review. But the clause also had limits. Limits the opposing attorney conveniently avoided mentioning. Our lawyer stood slowly. Her name was Rachel Lynn. She carried herself with quiet confidence that filled the room without raising her voice. Rachel walked toward the judge's bench and placed another document beside the contract. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the clause cited by opposing counsel contains a second condition." The opposing attorney shifted slightly. Rachel opened the document. The courtroom waited. The agreement states the company may claim ownership only if the innovation was developed using company resources or during assigned work responsibilities. She turned toward the judge. "The evidence submitted earlier proves the predictive architecture existed months before Mr. Mercer presented it internally." Rachel lifted a stack of printed records. Development logs, code history, personal computer timestamps. Each document traced the system's creation back to a period before the boardroom meeting. The judge studied the evidence carefully. Silence filled the courtroom again. Then Rachel spoke once more. "The system began as a personal research project built outside assigned responsibilities." She paused briefly. "The company rejected the proposal and declined to pursue the concept." Rachel placed the internal email on the evidence table again. The message from the chief strategy officer. "Not worth the time." Those words carried weight far beyond their length. The opposing attorney stepped forward again quickly. "Your Honor, the concept itself remains related to company operations. Mr. Mercer worked within the same industry while developing the idea." Rachel responded instantly. "Industry relevance does not create ownership." The judge leaned back in his chair. His expression remained neutral. But the room felt different now. The argument had shifted. This was no longer a simple accusation. It had become a question of timing, ownership, intent. The judge raised a hand. Both lawyers stopped speaking. He looked toward me. "Mr. Mercer." "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you create the predictive model before presenting it to the company?" "Yes." "Did you develop it using company equipment?" "No." "Did the company request the project?" "No." The judge nodded slowly. Then he turned toward the opposing attorney. "Counselor, do you possess evidence proving the technology was created under company instruction?" The attorney hesitated for half a second. That pause felt louder than any argument. "We believe the concept originated during his employment." Belief, not proof. Rachel did not interrupt. She simply waited. The judge studied the documents again. After several moments he spoke. "The court will review the full evidence before making a ruling on the injunction request." He struck the gavel. Court is adjourned. The room erupted into quiet conversations immediately. Lawyers gathered documents. Observers whispered. Reporters scribbled notes. I exhaled slowly for the first time in what felt like hours. Marcus approached from behind. "You handled that well." I barely spoke. That helped. We walked into the courthouse hallway where sunlight streamed through tall windows. Rachel joined us a moment later. "How did it look?" I asked. Rachel considered the question carefully. The injunction decision could go either way. That answer felt honest. If the judge sides with them temporarily, Signal Forge could be forced to pause operations during the trial. And if he denies the injunction, the company loses their strongest early advantage. Marcus crossed his arms. "They were hoping to shut us down before the case really begins." Rachel nodded. "That is the usual strategy." The hallway buzzed with reporters discussing the case. Some of them glanced toward us. The lawsuit had already attracted attention in the technology world. Stories about startups fighting corporations travel quickly. Marcus checked his phone. News outlets are already publishing articles. About the hearing? Yes. Good or bad? Mixed. He showed me one headline. Startup founder accused of stealing corporate technology. Another article carried a different angle. Internal emails reveal company ignored idea before lawsuit. Public opinion had already begun dividing. Some people believe the corporation. Others believe the evidence. Courtrooms rarely operate in isolation. Media attention can influence the atmosphere surrounding a case. Rachel placed the documents into her briefcase. "We should prepare for discovery immediately." Marcus nodded. Yes. Discovery meant something powerful. The company would be forced to release internal communication related to the idea. Emails, meeting notes, development plans. If those records showed they ignored the concept or attempted to copy it later, their lawsuit would weaken dramatically. But discovery carries risk for both sides. Signal Forge would also need to provide technical information about the system. Every line of code, every development step. Transparency cuts both directions. Rachel continued speaking. The opposing team will search for anything suggesting the idea formed inside the company. And if they find something, I asked, they will use it aggressively. Marcus looked thoughtful. That anonymous source inside the company could become very valuable. The thought returned again. Someone inside the corporation was helping quietly. Someone who had access to internal communication. Someone willing to risk exposure. That person might hold the key to everything. 2 days later, the judge's decision arrived. The message came through Rachel early in the morning. She called immediately. The injunction was denied. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. Denied? Yes. Relief flooded through me. Signal Forge could continue operating. Clients would remain. The system would keep running. Marcus laughed quietly when he heard the news. That removes their fastest weapon. But Rachel did not sound relaxed. This fight is only beginning. What happens next? I asked. Full trial preparation. The case would move deeper into court. More evidence. More testimony. More scrutiny. The corporation would not retreat easily. Large companies protect their reputation fiercely. Losing this case would expose something embarrassing. They had laughed at an idea that became valuable. And powerful organizations hate looking foolish. 3 weeks later, another message arrived from the anonymous source. This time, the document inside the email carried far greater weight. Because it revealed something shocking. An internal meeting transcript. A meeting that happened 2 weeks after my presentation. The executives were discussing the idea again. But the tone had changed completely. One executive said something that made my hands tighten while reading. We should build our own version before Mercer realizes what he has. The moment I finished reading the transcript, my hands felt colder. The document came from an internal executive meeting 2 weeks after the boardroom presentation. 2 weeks. That meant something had changed inside the company after they laughed at the idea. I read the message again slowly. The discussion began casually. Executives talking about product strategy, market competition. Then the conversation shifted toward my proposal. One executive spoke first. Mercer's idea might actually have value if implemented correctly. Another voice answered. He does not have the authority to lead something like that. Then came the sentence that made the entire room feel smaller. We should build our own version before Mercer realizes what he has. I stared at the words. Because they revealed the truth hidden beneath the lawsuit. The executives had not believed the idea during the meeting, but someone inside the company had thought about it afterward. Someone realized the potential. And instead of contacting me or reconsidering the proposal, they chose another path. Copy it quietly. The email thread continued below the transcript. More executives joined the discussion. Some suggested assigning engineers to study the concept. Others worried the idea might fail. But the chief strategy officer ended the conversation with a simple instruction. Evaluate internally. Do not involve Mercer. Those 4 words felt like evidence wrapped in arrogance. Marcus read the document 20 minutes later. His reaction came quickly. This is extremely damaging for them. How damaging? It shows intent. Intent to copy. Yes. He leaned forward in his chair. They rejected the idea publicly, then discussed building it privately. Marcus looked at the document again. That weakens their entire lawsuit. Rachel arrived soon afterward and studied the transcript carefully. This came from inside the company? Yes. Anonymous again? Yes. She nodded slowly. If this document proves authentic, their legal argument collapses. How do we prove it? Rachel tapped the paper. We asked the court to demand the original communication through discovery. If the company denied the conversation existed, their internal records would expose the lie. If they admitted it existed, their lawsuit would look dishonest. Either path carried risk for them. But Rachel noticed something else. This transcript also suggests something dangerous. What? They might already be developing their own system. Marcus nodded immediately. That would explain the press announcement. The Predictive Data Initiative. Suddenly, the timeline made sense. The company rejected my proposal publicly, then quietly explored the concept internally. Months later, they announced a similar project. The lawsuit was not just about ownership. It was about slowing Signal Forge while they built their own version. Marcus leaned back. In his chair. They are trying to buy time. Time for what? To catch up. The idea felt disturbingly logical. Large corporations move slowly at first, but when they decide something matters, they deploy enormous resources. Engineering teams. Data infrastructure. Budgets larger than most startups ever see. If they succeeded in copying the system, Signal Forge could face serious competition. Marcus stood and walked toward the window again. Traffic flowed steadily outside. Speed remains our advantage. Rachel nodded. Yes. Signal Forge improved every week. The machine learning engine refined itself with each new dataset. Clients continued joining quietly. 3 additional retail companies began pilot testing the platform. The results looked powerful. Demand predictions helped companies adjust inventory days before competitors noticed shifts. Profit margins improved. Waste dropped. Executives began asking questions. How does your system see these changes so early? The answer always felt simple. Patterns hide everywhere. Most companies simply fail to notice them. Still, the lawsuit hung over everything like a shadow. Court filings increased. Depositions scheduled. Lawyers asked detailed questions about development. Every technical detail faced scrutiny. One afternoon, I sat in a conference room answering questions from the opposing legal team. 3 attorneys surrounded the table. One of them asked calmly, "When did you first conceive the predictive demand concept?" 9 months before the boardroom presentation. Did anyone inside the company discuss similar ideas earlier? No. Did you ever use company data while building the system? Only during the internal demonstration. They wrote notes carefully. Then another attorney spoke. Do you believe your former employer misunderstood the idea? The question sounded strange. Yes. How can you be certain? Because they laughed. The attorneys exchanged glances. That detail had already appeared in the internal emails. Still, they continued pressing. Is it possible the company had already begun exploring predictive analytics before your presentation? I answered honestly. I never saw evidence of that. The deposition lasted 3 hours. Every detail examined carefully. But the most intense moment arrived near the end. One attorney leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, if the company truly rejected your proposal, why did you choose to leave your position shortly afterward? The question felt personal. Because the real answer involved more than frustration. It involved clarity. I realized something during that meeting, I said. What? The company did not understand what I built. And that made you leave? Yes. Why? Because something valuable deserves to exist somewhere that recognizes it. The room fell quiet for a moment. The attorney wrote something in his notebook. Then the deposition ended. Outside the building, Marcus waited beside his car. How did it go? They asked many questions. That is normal. I handed him the transcript from the anonymous source. Marcus read it again while standing beside the car. His expression remained thoughtful. This document changes the atmosphere of the trial. How? It introduces motive. Motive for copying the idea? Yes. He folded the paper carefully. If their internal records confirm this conversation, the jury will see exactly what happened. The truth already looked clear to me. Executives dismissed something they did not understand. Later they realized its value. Then they tried reclaiming it through legal pressure. But Marcus pointed out something even more interesting. This document might not be the most dangerous thing inside their records. What do you mean? If they truly attempted building their own version, internal engineering reports must exist. And those reports would show the timeline. Exactly. If the company started development only after my presentation, their lawsuit would look even weaker. Because the concept clearly originated outside their planning. Rachel submitted a discovery request that same week. The court ordered the company to produce internal documents related to predictive analytics projects, emails, meeting records, development plans, engineering reports, everything. The corporation had 30 days to respond. 30 days. That period felt strangely quiet. Signal Forge continued growing during that time. New clients joined. Prediction accuracy improved again. Investors began asking Marcus about future expansion. One venture fund suggested raising additional capital. But Marcus shook his head. Not yet. Why? I asked. Because something larger is approaching. What? Marcus smiled slightly. The moment the company delivers their internal documents. The deadline arrived on a cold morning 3 weeks later. Rachel called immediately. They sent the files. How many? Thousands. Emails. Meeting transcripts. Project notes. Engineering evaluations. Every piece of communication involving predictive analytics. Our legal team began reviewing everything. Hours passed. Then Rachel called again. Her voice sounded sharper this time. Daniel, you need to see something. What did they find? Rachel took a slow breath. An engineering report written by their internal data team. What about it? The report contains a familiar phrase. What phrase? She read the sentence directly from the document. The Mercer model demonstrates potential if properly implemented. When Rachel finished reading the sentence from the engineering report, the room around me felt suddenly quieter. The Mercer model demonstrates potential if properly implemented. My name, written inside their internal technical report. Not speculation, not accusation. Acknowledgement. Someone inside the company had studied the idea seriously after the boardroom meeting. Studied it enough to give it a name. Marcus took the printed report from Rachel's hands and read the line twice. Then he laughed softly. That is devastating. How? They just admitted the idea came from you. Rachel nodded. Exactly. The report continued for 12 pages. Engineers inside the company had analyzed my proposal carefully. They broke down the architecture. They evaluated the prediction logic. They even described possible improvements. Every paragraph carried the same silent message. They knew the idea worked. But something else inside the document made the situation even worse for them. One section described the timeline. The engineering team began evaluating the concept 2 weeks after the boardroom meeting. 2 weeks. That detail mattered, because the company claimed the idea belonged to them before my presentation. Yet their own engineers only began studying it afterward. Marcus tapped the page slowly. This destroys their timeline. Rachel agreed. If this reaches the jury, the narrative becomes very simple. What narrative? I asked. Rachel answered calmly. A founder created something valuable. A corporation rejected it. Then they tried to copy it. The truth sounded almost too simple. But courtroom stories often revolve around simple ideas. Fairness, ownership, credibility. Marcus looked thoughtful for a moment. This document might end the case. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Possibly. But they will still fight. Marcus nodded. Yes. Large companies rarely surrender quickly. Their reputation remained on the line. Admitting defeat would expose a costly mistake. And mistakes become dangerous when shareholders start asking questions. Over the next 2 weeks, our legal team studied every file the corporation released. Thousands of emails, dozens of meeting transcripts, engineering reports, budget proposals. Slowly, a pattern began appearing. Executives inside the company debated the predictive system for months after my presentation. Some believed the idea carried enormous potential. Others dismissed it repeatedly. One email from a senior vice president stood out. The Mercer proposal might be ahead of our current capabilities. Another message answered shortly afterward. If the startup world sees this idea first, we could lose the advantage. Those words felt strange, because by the time that email was written, Signal Forge already existed. The corporation simply did not know it yet. Marcus read the message and smiled. They were afraid. Of what? Of someone else building it. The irony felt almost unbelievable. The company feared losing an advantage they had already rejected. But the most explosive document appeared near the end of the discovery files. A private conversation between the chief executive officer and the chief strategy officer. The two men who laughed during the meeting. The transcript showed them discussing the predictive concept months later. The chief executive officer asked a simple question. Could Mercer build this outside the company? The chief strategy officer answered. Unlikely. He does not have the resources. Marcus placed the document on the table slowly. That statement aged badly. Rachel laughed quietly. Yes. Because Signal Forge now had something the executives did not expect. Investment, clients, real-world success, and growing attention. Media coverage around the lawsuit continued expanding. Technology blogs analyzed the evidence. Some journalists began calling Signal Forge a symbol of corporate arrogance. Others focused on the legal battle. A founder fighting his former employer for ownership of an idea worth millions. Public opinion slowly shifted. More articles appeared supporting Signal Forge. Stories highlighting the internal emails. Stories about the laughter during the meeting. Reputation can change quickly when evidence appears. The corporation felt that pressure. 3 weeks before the trial date, something unexpected happened. Marcus received a message from their legal team. They wanted a private meeting. No court. No press. Just negotiation. Marcus invited Rachel and me into the conference room before the call. They want to settle. Already? I asked. Rachel nodded. They see the evidence. The video call began a few minutes later. 3 lawyers appeared on the screen. Calm expressions. Professional voices. Their lead attorney spoke first. We believe a resolution outside the courtroom might benefit both parties. Marcus leaned back comfortably. What kind of resolution? The attorney continued. Our client proposes acquiring the predictive technology. The sentence hung in the air. Acquiring. Not reclaiming. Not demanding ownership. Buying it. Marcus asked the obvious question. What price are they offering? The attorney looked at another document. $20 million. The number landed quietly. 20 million. The same executives who laughed at the idea now wanted to buy it. But Marcus did not react immediately. He simply folded his hands. That offer seems small. The attorneys exchanged glances. This is a generous settlement considering the legal dispute. Marcus shook his head slowly. No, the attorney frowned slightly. Then what do you propose? Marcus looked directly into the camera. My client already has investors. Clients. Technology proven in the market. He paused briefly. If your company wants to purchase Signal Forge, the price will reflect its true value. The attorney waited. Marcus delivered the number calmly. $200 million. Silence filled the video call. The attorneys stared at Marcus as if he had just spoken another language. One of them finally answered. That figure is unrealistic. Marcus smiled slightly. Then we will see each other in court. The call ended shortly afterward. I looked at Marcus. 200 million. He shrugged. Signal Forge might be worth more. The idea felt surreal. 3 months earlier, the executives called the system a toy. Now negotiations involved hundreds of millions. But Marcus was not finished explaining. The corporation will not be the only buyer. What do you mean? Other companies are already watching this case. Because of the media coverage? Yes. He leaned forward slightly. When a powerful system appears publicly, large corporations begin calculating possibilities. Possibilities of buying it. Marcus nodded. The lawsuit accidentally advertised your technology. The idea made sense. Signal Forge had become visible, and visibility attracts attention from competitors. But Marcus said something else that made my pulse rise. The next phase of this story will not happen inside a courtroom. Where then? In a bidding war. The moment Marcus said the next phase would become a bidding war, I felt something shift inside the room. Until that point, the entire fight had revolved around defense. Defending the idea. Defending the company. Defending the truth. Now Marcus was talking about offense. About turning the lawsuit itself into leverage. Imagine spending months protecting something fragile, only to realize the pressure surrounding it might increase its value instead of destroying it. That realization felt strange at first, but Marcus had already seen this pattern before. Controversy attracts attention. Attention attracts money. And money changes the balance of power faster than any legal argument. 2 days after the failed settlement call, the first signal appeared. A large technology firm contacted Marcus privately. They wanted a demonstration of Signal Forge. Not a casual conversation. A serious evaluation. Marcus invited me into his office the moment the email arrived. They have been watching the case, he said. Which company? He turned the laptop toward me. The name belonged to one of the largest logistics corporations in North America. A company managing millions of shipments every week. Their operations depended on predicting demand, supply, timing. Everything Signal Forge did perfectly. They think your system could transform their logistics network, Marcus said. When do they want to see it? Tomorrow. The speed surprised me. But Marcus only smiled. Large corporations move slowly until they sense advantage. Then they move very fast. The demonstration happened the next morning through a secure video conference. 5 executives joined the call. Operations directors, data engineers, strategy managers. Their questions began immediately. How far ahead can the system predict supply disruptions? Can it integrate with existing logistics platforms? What kind of accuracy does the model maintain across multiple industries? I answered each question while running live simulations. The prediction engine scanned shipping data from public logistics networks. Signals appeared within seconds. Potential delays, demand surges, regional bottlenecks. One executive leaned closer to his screen. If this system existed inside our network last year, we would have avoided several major disruptions. Marcus listened quietly. Then the executive asked the question Marcus had been waiting for. Is Signal Forge available for acquisition? Marcus did not hesitate. It depends on the offer. The executive nodded slowly. We will discuss internally. The meeting ended soon afterward, but the atmosphere inside the office felt completely different. Because another email arrived less than an hour later. A second corporation requesting a demonstration. This one from the retail industry. A multinational company managing thousands of stores. Marcus looked at the message and smiled. The signal is spreading. The next week turned into a storm of meetings. 5 corporations. 7 demonstrations. Every company wanted to see the system. Every company asked the same question near the end. What would it take to acquire Signal Forge? The lawsuit had accidentally turned into a spotlight. Technology blogs continued writing about the case. Journalists discussed the internal emails. Executives across multiple industries began asking themselves a simple question. What if the system actually worked? And once that question entered their minds, curiosity followed. Curiosity quickly turned into opportunity. One evening, Marcus called me into his office again. He closed the door behind us. The offers are starting. He placed 3 documents on the desk. 3 acquisition proposals. 3 different corporations, each one offering to purchase Signal Forge. The lowest offer stood at $80 million. The highest already exceeded $130 million. For a moment, I simply stared at the numbers. 8 months earlier, the boardroom had laughed at a $2 million investment. Now corporations were competing to buy the system for more than $100 million. Marcus watched my reaction carefully. This is only the beginning. What do you mean? None of these companies want their competitors to own the technology. He tapped the documents again, which means the price will climb. But the most interesting part came next. Because the corporation suing us suddenly contacted Marcus again. This time their tone felt different. No threats, no accusations, just a request. Another private meeting. Marcus accepted the call 2 days later. The same 3 lawyers appeared on the screen. But something had changed in their expressions. Confidence had disappeared. Concern replaced it. Their lead attorney spoke carefully. Our client understands Signal Forge has received acquisition interest. Marcus nodded. Yes. We would like to reopen settlement discussions. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What are you proposing? The attorney cleared his throat. Our client is prepared to increase the offer. How much? The attorney hesitated slightly. $75 million. Marcus laughed quietly. Not a mocking laugh. A calm one. You offered $20 million 2 weeks ago. Yes. Now you offer 75. The attorney remained silent. Marcus folded his hands. The market has already spoken. What do you mean? Signal Forge currently has offers exceeding $100 million. The attorneys exchanged glances again, because they knew something Marcus also understood. If another corporation acquired Signal Forge, the companies suing us might lose access to the technology entirely. Their lawsuit suddenly looked dangerous for them, because losing in court would expose their mistake publicly, and losing the bidding war would leave them without the system. Marcus ended the call politely, but the pressure on the corporation continued growing. More articles appeared about the case. More companies requested demonstrations. Within another week, the bidding crossed $180 million. The numbers began feeling unreal. Yet Marcus remained calm, because he understood something I had not fully realized yet. The true turning point had not arrived. That moment would happen inside the courtroom, because the trial date was approaching. And when the jury saw the internal documents, the emails, the engineering reports, the transcript where executives planned to copy the idea, everything would become public. Marcus explained the situation clearly one night while reviewing the offers. If the court rules in your favor, the price will explode. And if we lose, the companies suing us might gain control. I nodded slowly. So the verdict decides everything. Yes. Marcus looked at the documents again. The corporations bidding for Signal Forge know this. They are waiting. Yes. Waiting for the moment when the legal uncertainty disappears. Because once the court confirms ownership, the technology becomes one of the most valuable predictive systems in the market. The trial would begin in 2 weeks. 2 weeks before the truth reached a courtroom. 2 weeks before the executives who laughed would sit under oath and explain their decisions. And somewhere inside the corporation, the person sending anonymous emails was still watching. Because another message arrived the following morning. This one contained only a short sentence. They are terrified of the trial. The morning the trial began, the courthouse steps looked like the entrance to a major event. Reporters gathered near the doors with cameras ready. Journalists from technology magazines stood beside legal analysts discussing the case. Microphones pointed toward anyone walking inside. 3 months earlier, Signal Forge had been a quiet startup operating in a rented office. Now it had become the center of a national legal battle. I walked past the reporters without speaking. Marcus walked beside me calmly. "You look like someone heading into a championship game," he said. "That obvious?" "Yes." "And how do you look?" "Like someone who has seen this situation before." Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere felt different from the earlier hearing. More people filled the seats. Industry observers, journalists, law students, even a few executives from companies that had submitted acquisition offers. Everyone understood something significant was about to happen. The jury entered first. 12 strangers who would decide the ownership of a technology worth hundreds of millions. Then the judge took his seat. The opposing attorneys arranged their files carefully. Our legal team prepared their evidence. Rachel stood beside our table reviewing her notes. The trial began with opening statements. The corporation's lead attorney addressed the jury confidently. He described the company as a victim of intellectual theft. He claimed I had taken internal knowledge and built a private company around it. His voice carried authority. His argument sounded polished. For 20 minutes, he painted a picture of corporate betrayal. Then Rachel stood. Her tone sounded calm and controlled. She began with a simple sentence. "This case is not about theft." She paused. "It is about regret." The jury watched her closely. Rachel continued. "A young analyst built something valuable on his own time. He presented the idea to his employer. They laughed." The word laughter echoed quietly across the courtroom. Rachel placed the internal email on the screen for the jury to see. The message from the chief strategy officer. "Not worth the time." The jurors read the sentence slowly. Rachel spoke again. "The company rejected the idea clearly." She lifted another document. The engineering report. "The Mercer model demonstrates potential if properly implemented." Rachel turned toward the jury. Months later, the same company tried building the idea themselves. The courtroom remained silent. Because the story sounded simple, clear, and human. A creator presenting an idea. A corporation dismissing it. Then attempting to reclaim it once the value became obvious. Rachel finished her opening statement quietly. "This trial will show the difference between ownership and opportunity." The evidence phase began shortly afterward. Witnesses from the corporation spoke first. Executives described the company's innovation culture. They insisted the predictive concept had always existed within their strategic planning. But their confidence weakened under cross-examination. Rachel asked precise questions. "When did the company begin studying predictive demand architecture?" One executive hesitated. "After Mr. Mercer presented his proposal." The admission landed heavily. Rachel continued. "Did the company request Mr. Mercer to develop the system?" "No." "Did the company invest in the idea before rejecting it?" "No." Each answer built the same story. The corporation saw the idea, then dismissed it. The most dramatic moment arrived when the chief strategy officer took the stand. The same man who laughed during my presentation. Rachel approached him calmly. "You attended the meeting where Mr. Mercer presented his system?" "Yes." "Do you remember your reaction?" "I believe the idea required further evaluation." Rachel displayed the internal email on the courtroom screen. The message appeared clearly. "Not worth the time." The chief strategy officer shifted slightly in his chair. "Do you recognize this email?" "Yes." "You wrote it the day after the meeting?" "Yes." Rachel paused briefly. "Is it fair to say the company rejected the proposal at that moment?" The witness hesitated. "Yes." A quiet murmur moved through the courtroom. Rachel delivered the next question slowly. "If the company rejected the idea, how could it belong to the company?" The witness had no answer. Later that afternoon, the engineering report appeared before the jury. Rachel asked another witness to read the sentence aloud. "The Mercer model demonstrates potential if properly implemented." The jurors looked directly at me when they heard the words. The report carried weight because it confirmed something obvious. The idea had a name inside the company. My name. The corporation had studied it, discussed it, evaluated it, but only after rejecting it publicly. By the end of the second day, the narrative had become clear. The corporation tried claiming ownership of an idea they ignored, but the most explosive testimony had not happened yet. Rachel called one final witness on the third morning, a former engineer from the corporation's data team, the same team that wrote the internal report. The engineer looked nervous while taking the stand. Rachel spoke gently. "You worked on the predictive evaluation project." "Yes." "Who instructed your team to review the Mercer proposal?" The engineer glanced briefly toward the corporation's legal table, then answered, "The chief executive officer." The courtroom reacted instantly. Rachel continued carefully. "What was the purpose of that evaluation?" "To determine whether the idea could be replicated internally." Replicated. The word carried enormous meaning. Rachel asked one final question. "Did the company ever contact Mr. Mercer about continuing the project?" "No." The engineer stepped down shortly afterward. The jury had heard everything. Rejection, evaluation, replication, attempted ownership. By the time the trial entered its final stage, the atmosphere felt different. Confidence had shifted. The corporation's attorneys looked tense. Rachel delivered the closing argument late that afternoon. Her voice sounded steady. "This case is simple. A creator brought an idea to his employer. They rejected it. Later they realized its value." She paused briefly, and then they tried to take it back. The jury listened carefully. Rachel finished with a single sentence. "Ownership belongs to the person who built the idea, not the one who laughed at it." The courtroom grew quiet as the judge dismissed the jury for deliberation. Marcus leaned toward me. "Now we wait." "How long?" "Hours. Possibly longer." But something inside me already felt certain, because the truth had been spoken clearly inside that courtroom. Still, one final twist remained. Because while the jury deliberated, my phone buzzed quietly. Another message from the anonymous source. The sentence inside the email made my pulse rise immediately. "They are preparing a massive offer if they lose." The jury returned the next morning. The courtroom filled earlier than usual. Reporters occupied nearly every available seat. Executives from multiple corporations sat quietly along the back wall. Even people who had no connection to the case appeared curious about the outcome, because by now everyone understood what the verdict could trigger. Ownership of Signal Forge. Ownership of the predictive engine. Ownership of technology that several corporations were already trying to buy. Marcus leaned toward me while the jury entered. "This moment decides everything." The 12 jurors took their seats. The judge looked across the courtroom and spoke calmly. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury foreperson stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Every sound in the room disappeared. I could hear my own breathing. The foreperson held a folded document. "In the matter of corporate ownership versus Daniel Mercer," he paused. Then he read the sentence that changed everything. "The jury finds in favor of the defendant." For a moment, nothing moved. Then the courtroom erupted. Reporters began whispering loudly. Several observers stood from their seats. One of the corporation's attorneys dropped his pen onto the table. The judge struck the gavel to restore order. But the message had already spread through the room. Signal Forge belonged to me. The corporation had lost. Marcus shook my hand quietly. "I told you." Relief moved through my chest like a wave. Months of pressure vanished in seconds. The lawsuit ended. The ownership question answered. But something even larger was about to begin. Because the moment the verdict reached the outside world, the bidding war exploded. Marcus's phone began vibrating within minutes. One message after another arrived. Investors, executives, corporate strategy teams, everyone reacting to the same news. Legal uncertainty had disappeared. Signal Forge was now a clean acquisition target, and companies that had been waiting quietly suddenly started competing aggressively. By the time we left the courthouse, Marcus had already received 3 new offers. The lowest stood at $210 million. The highest reached $245 million. I stared at the numbers while sitting in the car. $245 million. The same idea executives once called a toy had now become one of the most valuable technologies in its field. Marcus drove slowly through traffic while answering calls. Each conversation sounded similar. "Yes, the system remains available." "Yes, the court confirmed ownership." "Yes, we are evaluating offers." By the end of the afternoon, another company entered the competition. A global retail corporation with enormous data infrastructure. Their opening proposal reached $260 million. The bidding war had fully ignited. Marcus gathered every offer in a single document that evening. 7 companies competing. 7 corporations trying to secure the same technology. He placed the list on the table. This rarely happens. What does not happen? Multiple industries fighting for the same startup. The offers continued climbing during the next 48 hours. 270 million, 280 million, 284 million. Each new number arrived with urgency. Corporations understood the risk. If a competitor acquired SignalForge, the predictive advantage could shift entire markets. Logistics, retail, manufacturing. Every industry built around supply and demand wanted the same weapon. But one offer stood out above the rest. The global retail corporation returned with a final proposal. $300 million. Marcus read the message twice. Then he leaned back slowly. That might end the bidding. 300 million. The number felt almost impossible. 8 months earlier, the idea could not secure $2 million from my employer. Now a single corporation was ready to spend $300 million to own it. Marcus arranged a meeting with their executives the next morning. 5 representatives joined the video call. Their chief strategy officer spoke first. We believe SignalForge represents the future of market intelligence. Marcus listened quietly. Then the executive continued. Our company is prepared to acquire SignalForge for $300 million. The number echoed again inside the room. But the executive added one more condition. We want the founder to remain involved during the transition period. Marcus looked at me. I nodded. $300 million. The negotiation lasted less than an hour. By the time the meeting ended, the agreement had been reached. SignalForge would be acquired. The system would expand across the corporation's entire global network. And the technology that once lived inside my apartment would soon operate across thousands of stores worldwide. The acquisition announcement appeared in the news 2 days later. Headlines spread across business websites. Startup founder wins lawsuit and sells technology for $300 million. Corporation that rejected idea watches rival buy it. The story traveled fast, especially inside the company that had laughed in the boardroom. Former colleagues began sending messages. Some congratulated me. Others expressed disbelief. But one message stood out above the rest. A short email from an unknown address. No greeting. No name. Just one sentence. I was the one sending the documents. The anonymous source. The person who quietly revealed the internal emails. I read the message twice. Then another sentence appeared below it. They deserve to lose. $300 million sounds like a number from another world when you see it written on paper. Yet the strangest part of the entire story was not the number. It was the silence that followed. After months of courtrooms, legal arguments, and reporters asking questions, everything suddenly became quiet. The acquisition closed 2 weeks after the announcement. Lawyers finalized the agreements. Engineers began preparing the system for integration with the new company's global infrastructure. SignalForge stopped being a small startup and became part of a corporate machine operating across thousands of stores in dozens of countries. The same prediction engine that once ran on 2 monitors inside my apartment now processed massive streams of global data every second. Supply chains, inventory flows, customer demand signals from millions of transactions. The system performed exactly the same way it always had, quietly watching patterns, quietly predicting the future. But something else happened during those weeks. The company that laughed at the idea began appearing in the news again, not because of innovation, because of questions. Shareholders wanted explanations. Analysts began asking why executives dismissed an idea that later sold for $300 million. Journalists replayed the internal emails during interviews. The sentence, "not worth the time," appeared again and again in articles. Public companies rarely enjoy that kind of attention. Mistakes become expensive when the public starts counting the cost. One morning, Marcus forwarded me an article. The headline carried a sharp tone. Corporation investigates leadership decisions after $300 million missed opportunity. I read the article carefully. An internal review had begun. Executives were being questioned about the boardroom meeting, about the rejection, about the lawsuit. Some people inside the company were already stepping down quietly. Reputation damage spread slowly at first, then all at once. But the most unexpected moment arrived a month later. Marcus called me early one morning. "You should read this." He sent another message. This one contained a press release. from the same company that sued Signal Forge. I opened the document slowly. Halfway through the statement, a familiar phrase appeared. The company announced a new partnership agreement with the corporation that had just acquired Signal Forge. My system, the technology they fought in court, the idea they tried to claim. Now they needed it. Because their competitors were already gaining advantage from the predictions. Supply chains were shifting faster. Retail demand patterns were being anticipated days earlier. The market had already begun adjusting to a world where predictive intelligence existed. Ignoring it was no longer possible. Marcus laughed quietly when I finished reading. They lost the lawsuit. And now they became a client. Yes. The irony felt almost unbelievable. The executives who once dismissed the system would now depend on it. Not ownership. Access. They would pay licensing fees to use the technology they tried to take. The same idea they called a toy now controlled part of their future strategy. Weeks later, I walked through the headquarters of the corporation that acquired Signal Forge. Rows of engineers worked beside enormous screens displaying global market data. The prediction engine ran continuously. Millions of data signals moved through the system every second. Patterns appeared instantly. Demand shifts. Supply disruptions. Opportunities emerging across different regions. The machine I once built alone had become something much larger. But the memory of the boardroom still stayed with me. That moment when laughter filled the room. That moment when powerful people decided the idea had no value. Imagine standing there again, holding the presentation remote, watching executives smile politely while ignoring the system running behind you. At that moment, I believed something had failed. But time reveals strange truths. Sometimes rejection is not the end of an idea. Sometimes rejection is the moment an idea escapes the wrong place. If those executives had approved the proposal that day, the story might have ended quietly inside their company. No startup, no lawsuit, no bidding war. The idea would have belonged to them. Instead, they ignored it. And ignoring something valuable carries a price. $300 million in this case. A few months after the acquisition, I received one final message from the anonymous source. The person who sent the internal emails. This time the message contained a name. Robert, the senior manager who spoke to me near the boardroom door the day of the presentation. Do not take it personally. They reject dozens of ideas every month. Robert explained why he sent the documents. He had watched executives dismiss good ideas repeatedly. Mine simply happened to be the one he decided to protect. His final sentence stayed with me longer than any courtroom speech. They laughed because they believed power decides value. He paused. But markets decide value eventually. The story of Signal Forge ended with a strange balance. The system continued growing. Companies across multiple industries adopted the predictive platform. The corporation that once rejected the idea paid to use it. And the boardroom, where everything started, still existed somewhere inside that building. Another meeting probably happening. Another presentation probably ignored. Somewhere an employee might be standing in front of a screen explaining something powerful. And somewhere in that room someone might laugh. If you have ever watched people ignore your idea, imagine what happens next. Sometimes the biggest opportunity appears right after the door closes. Because the world outside that room might understand something the room never will. And the next time someone laughs at an idea that matters, the smartest move might be simple. Take the idea somewhere else.